Supply Chain Talk, the live webinar with no presentations, no PowerPoint, just talk.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Supply Chain Talk. This afternoon, our main topic is going to be the Internet of Things, the IoT in the enhanced, streamlined supply chain. And first, as is always the case, we will discuss a topical news item. As always, we invite your comments and questions, and we'll try to respond to as many of those as we can. And the question or contribution we find the most useful will be awarded a Supply Chain Talk mug. If it will appear, but there it is. So we'll awarding one of those to the contribution we value most. And even if we can't answer every question and comment, I know that the audience really like seeing the shared experiences that you might want to put up there. We have one or two little technical problems today in that one of our guests, Michael Weinberg, who was on the programme, unfortunately has had an emergency and can't join us. And Nermeen is going to be a little bit late because she's having technical problems in Cairo, but hopefully she will be with us shortly. But let me introduce my other two guests. And the first of these is Andre Kirkland, who's lead tech program manager at Nike. Welcome, Andre. Andre leads innovation at Nike, focusing on transforming products and consumer experiences through emerging technologies. And fittingly, he's an avid collector of sneakers, but he has purposely lost count of how many shoes are in his closet, so he doesn't have to answer that question. So welcome, Andre. And our second guest is Tony Lancioni, who is supply chain and product lifecycle lead at Noble Gas Systems. And that is a US manufacturer of conformable tanks for hydrogen. Tony's got over 20 years of supply chain and sustainability expertise within industries that include automotive, mobility, consumer products, and renewable energies. And Tony also teaches procurement management and contemporary logistics at Madonna University in Michigan. And away from home, Tony enjoys spending time with his wife and 3 children. And our third guest, as I say, hopefully who will be joining us within a few minutes, is Nermeen Farouk Gamia, and she is based in Cairo and is Director of Procurement and Cost Management at Alex Bank. And Nermeen has worked for 15 years leading supply chain teams in many global brands like Unilever, Vodafone, and Coca-Cola. And she's also delivered many benefits through procurement, cost saving, and efficiency, including a recent robotics project. So welcome, Andre and Tony, and all being well, Nermeen, in a minute. Our news story we've picked is it was in really all the newspapers and supply chain press in the past week, and it's all about the one we've chosen is from The Guardian in London, titled "Fears of Employee Displacement as Amazon Brings Robots into Warehouses." And the article and all the other ones around this time were focusing on the new Amazon robot called Digit. Those of us will remember that Amazon's always been pretty strong on warehouse robotics. They acquired the manufacturer Kiva, which is a wheeled kind of platform type of robot quite a few years ago, and that's in absolutely tens or hundreds of thousands of units are now worldwide in its warehouses. But this is focusing on a new robot called Digit, which is a 2-legged robot, very much in human form, that can grasp and lift items. And initially, it's being used to just shift empty tote boxes, which I guess is a bit of piloting where nothing much can go wrong. But the chief technologist there says that although it will render some jobs redundant, it would create new jobs as well. And it does not mean that Amazon will require fewer staff. Not quite sure if I quite believe that, I have to say, but we can discuss that. Some other points, it talks about how it can, the robot can move about, it can get into tight spaces, it can carry up to 35 pounds or 16 kilos, which is, I think, actually less than humans are allowed to lift as a single lift. I think we're allowed to in fact lift slightly more than that, so somewhat limited range there. And there is a video attached, certainly, to some of the articles, which shows the robot at work. And again, to be honest, it kind of looks a little bit slow and shaky at the moment, but it's early days. And finally, the spokesman for Amazon does say, this is all, in a way, the journey of having robots that we don't even really think about. Your dishwasher in the kitchen is kind of a robot, but we don't really think about it as a robot. We just think it's something we use every day. So I guess that's some of their journey. So kind of, a really interesting move from Amazon. Is this humanoid robot kind of a bit of a waste of time? I mean, sure, humanoid robots incredibly valuable, say in the home, but warehouses, let's face it, have got level floors, so wheeled, kind of machinery is absolutely fine. It does seem to have rather limited sort of capabilities at the moment. So, what do we think we should take from this story? Andre, what are your thoughts about Digit?
Yeah, so my initial thought was it's innovation, right? It's an innovation that is exploratory. When we talk about exploratory innovations and exploratory technologies, sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. Maybe it's a matter of validating a use case, or maybe it's kind of seeing what use case fits, right, or where a use case may be. I do agree with you just in terms of the kind of the pessimistic. Maybe I have a more of a pessimistic view in terms of the headcount and the people impact of a Digit in a warehouse. But that's not to say that there wouldn't be, say, job creation or headcount or resources allocated elsewhere, right? Whenever we introduce automation, it's, hey, yes, we can reduce our headcount, or we can leverage this headcount for other activities, right? So maybe we go from picking and packing to more maintenance of these robots, because it's tech, it's hardware, it's going to need maintenance, right? So those are some of my initial thoughts on the article. I think it's innovation and kind of validating or finding a use case, and then to kind of understanding what are the job impacts of the folks who are doing these current processes, activities.
Great, thank you very much, Andre. Tony, what do you think? Do you think the job cuts is the big concern, or do you think it's not too much of a worry for now?
Yeah, I think Andre nailed it. It's an innovation, it's a journey. I think the scariest part of it is the fact that it looks like a humanoid, right? Because you said it perfectly. We're in a warehouse. We've seen how robotics, and whether it be Amazon fulfillment centers, can move very fluidly and efficiently from a parcel and fulfillment perspective. So honestly, the humanoid robot is the scariest part of it. In terms of employment, I've battled back and forth with things like robots and AI, and will it displace, will it create jobs, and I think it's going to do a mix of both. I do think there will be opportunities brought on by it, but I think what it's going to do overall is take out the monotonous and the, let's just say, where there's safety hazards, where there's a lot of safety hazards in warehouses, right? So where robots can, take that over and become the primary conduit there, where humans can focus on other things, then I think that's going to be the most valuable piece of this. And hopefully it plays out that way.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I must say, to me, it did feel, you're right with thinking about the safety aspect. And to me, something like unloading an absolutely jam-packed container from the Far East, that's where it's loose loaded, there's loads of boxes, that to me is where a humanoid robot could be very effective, because actually you're going up and down the ramps. It's kind of, it's all a little bit of a less controlled environment. But I have to say, what it's doing at the moment seems a bit limited. And Andre, the article didn't really make it clear whether the robot ultimately will be able to kind of pick individual products like a human. And certainly I've seen, robotic arms, which tend to be kind of fixed in position, and they've got the optical recognitions. They can kind of pick things up from loose things in a bin and whatever. What do you think if it gets that? Would you think it's likely to go that way? And do you think that's a much more of a threat?
Yeah, that's just kind of the exploratory nature of the innovation, right? Okay, so we have this humanoid bot, kind of exploring what all can we do. Right now, it's you mentioned there was a video in the article, and I encourage everyone to check it out. Just moving a tote back and forth or setting them up on the line, right? So that's where we start. What are the long-term capabilities as technology continues to evolve? New capabilities are introduced, and how does that impact processes and activities that the robot, the humanoid, that Digit can perform. So it's kind of taking what we see right now and then imagining what could be. But I very much agree with you that it is limited in scope and capability right now, just in terms of moving a tote from a part of a line to another line.
Yeah. Okay. And Tony, any sort of final thoughts on you? I mean, Amazon don't do things lightly. Yeah, sometimes they try things and they don't work, but they normally know what they're doing. Where do you think they're heading with this ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's an innovation. It's Amazon, right? You said it. They don't take things lightly. They go kind of all in, and it looks like that's what they're doing with this digit. Now, I will say that, as it stands today, and you're right, it wasn't really clear on what digit can do and where digit's going, the technology's going. But if for example, digit had the ability to, have these stilts that moved up and down and could pick boxes that were on the top shelf of a 20-foot warehouse, or have an arm that went, so far, maybe there could be some good application for this, or fix a sprinkler in the top of the ceiling without a ladder, therefore, harming an individual. So I think that there is something to this. Where it's at right now, maybe not, but it is a journey, and it's Amazon, and I'm sure they'll figure it out if anybody can.
There's some interesting ideas there, how to say. And I think your other point is it is humanoid in shape. And I don't know, in terms of kind of getting buy-in from workers, if your co-worker is a kind of pretty weird, kind of slightly creepy looking robot versus a little wheeled thing trundling around, I don't know, I think I prefer just to have the kind of rather lower key little thing trundling around with trays on it and so on. I've seen, there's all sorts of variations of those which can work very nicely alongside people, but who knows where it will all go. Maybe they'll just give it a slightly more cheerful expression. And
well, think about it real quick, Alistair. Like, if we're looking to better what we're doing, why would we create something that can only have the limitations of a human, right? So there's definitely something in Amazon's back pocket with this and where they're going with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We shall see. Okay, great. Well, let's move now to our main topic, which is the Internet of Things in the enhanced streamlined supply chain. And the first topic we've got here, the first question really, is around using IoT to automate processes and cut your costs. So I guess on that, to me, it's interesting, is the IoT actually going to automate processes, or is it just able to give more frequent and detailed data? So I'm interested in your thoughts on that. And are there examples where you think Internet of Things can just make that difference to enable automation, where otherwise maybe you couldn't automate? So Andre, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, exactly. I think you nailed it on the latter. I think IoT enables automation where maybe automation wasn't possible before, in terms of data capture. And what I mean by that is IoT isn't necessarily you don't automate using IoT, but because of the visibility of say assets that you get because of IoT, then that enables you to automate different data flows, different activities, and gain visibility and insights into some processes in your facility that could then lead to automation. But the inherent nature of IoT is just the connection and the visibility, but it doesn't necessarily enable automation.
Yeah. Okay. And are there sort of areas where you're thinking actually, just that having that real kind of almost live, or however frequent you want it, that much more detailed data that will allow something to be automated?
Yeah, I think whenever you talk about, we'll say IoT and connectivity things, right? Asset tracking has been a big one when it comes to supply chain, whether it's in reverse logistics or whether it's inventory management or XYZ, whatever the case may be, right? And so when you look at connectivity and the data insights that can be enabled from that, what are the processes that take place when it comes to managing inventory? What are the processes that take place when it comes to retrieving your assets back from the market? We're talking about reverse logistics processes, and maybe dwell time, or maybe it's leakage in terms of assets kind of falling off the beaten path, so to speak, right? And so then what processes can you then put in place and automate to maybe reduce that leakage or increase those turn times or decrease the dwell time, right? And that's the piece where I'm looking at, where I'm talking about the data insights about our assets or inventory that we can then say, hey, because of IoT, we have visibility to all these metrics that we didn't have before, right? Now, what are our processes that drive these metrics, that drive these KPIs? And then how can we start automating some points or the end-to-end process to decrease, or we'll say improve, these metrics and KPIs?
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. That's a really interesting thoughts there. Tony, your thoughts on process automation enabled by Internet of Things?
Yeah, similar to what Andre said, I think it's gonna do a little bit of both. So from an automation standpoint, think about this, and this isn't something that's out of the realm. I've actually seen this in a plant before, where it's a fully automated plant, but the connectivity of the entire plant is what's really special. So there's very minimal human beings in this, and it's operating efficiently. But if you are a human being, you're walking into a plant with some glasses and you're seeing things real time from a data perspective, right? Let's say it's a metal stamping plant where you can actually see the metrics, your cycle times, how many parts you've done in an hour, right on your glasses from what's happening in the machine. Or from a maintenance perspective, you're looking at the machine and seeing where there's bugs, where there's things that are happening, or within the walls of your facilities that you might need some maintenance on a pipe. Or better yet, to take it one step further in terms of an asset, let's say you're looking at expanding a facility. You could sit there and digital twin that within the means of this connectivity, this connected plant, from an IoT perspective, and see how that would look in your plant without actually doing the calculations on Excel or anything like that, right? So from that perspective of automation, you're automating entire processes that have been done, especially in industries like the automotive industry, for years, right? You're doing that almost at the snap of your finger. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, but it's being done now, Alistair. I've seen it in plants in Germany that are fully connected, and they're replicating this in a lot of areas.
That's great examples there. And it's really interesting that you mentioned digital twins, which is what we discussed in last week's episode. And when I concluded that, I said, Internet of Things is going to be very relevant, as a follow-on. And so absolutely, they're very well connected. But on digital twins, one of the things we discussed last week was, and it does tie in again to Internet of Things, how is an Internet of Things different to traditional telematics? Because, telematics has been there for decades in various ways. And I guess Internet of Things, depending what sensors you got, you can kind of stick them on more things. But ultimately, are we just hyping up good old-fashioned telematics? Andre, to you first. I'm not sure if you've got much experience in that world of telematics. Are you envisaging having an Internet of Things sensor in every pair of Nike trainers sent out, so people can track their movements and their, everything like that without even having to kind of wear a kind of sports watch or whatever?
Yeah, and so going back to what we talked about in the article, innovation can go many different ways, right? And I think that's the kind of discovery, exploratory nature of innovation. So who knows? Maybe we will see sensors in different articles of apparel or footwear. When we look at I remember seeing a video a while back by some former Apple employees when it was a TED Talk. It was the idea or concept of a disappearing computer, right? When we look at computers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and capabilities and the computing power is getting larger and larger and larger. What does that mean, right? One day will we have a computer that could fit in that's smaller than the Apple Watch, right? It's incredible in terms of when you think about what is possible versus where we are right now because of computing power continuing to exponentially grow and computers continue to get smaller and smaller. So who knows? I think that's the exploratory nature of innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. Tony, so back to you on that sort of question of telematics versus IoT versus digital twins. Have you got a way that you would explain or describe the difference between those?
In really simple terms, I would say telematics and digital twins fit into a Internet of Things, right? So if you look at Internet of Things as the kind of the overall umbrella, then the telematics, yes, which has been around for a while, and then digital twin, which is fairly new technology, would fit within it to create this fully connected atmosphere. So if you look at a fleet, for example, you have telematics that's tracking performance. You have it's tracking maintenance of whether it be a vehicle or a conduit or something like that. And the Internet of Things is connecting it all. Okay, how many of these are we running? When do we usually need to repair? Where can we go to fill? It's really connecting it all and putting it into something that's digestible for executive teams, for supervisors, for the user themselves. And that could extrapolate into even the consumer in some aspects of the data, right? So you're really getting a lot of data and connectivity from a lot of different conduits or sensors or telematics and putting it all into one place.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great explanation. Thank you. Our second point was talking about how the right IoT in the right places can best improve your supply chain. And I thought I'd just bring in here, obviously the IoT still has a lot of costs. I mean, there's the cost of sensors, there's the cost of receivers, there's the cost and challenge of how do you handle huge amounts of data. And as an example, I just kind of was thinking, well, if you're dealing with a really large distribution center, which might hold 50,000 pallets, and it might have, in addition, 50,000 pick locations. And I was working out, even if you only take data from each location, so you're not taking it from every single product or every single carton of product, you're just taking it from each location, and you only take it every 5 minutes. You're not kind of saying, I want it every minute, every 10 seconds. That would create 1 billion data points per month. And that's a lot of data, even with the amount of data we have these days. So it does just highlight kind of, we talk about these things, but there's a lot to kind of get to grips with to make IoT work and really drive insight and benefit. So I guess my question is, to you, Andre, first, where do you think there is the greatest potential value from IoT?
I think the greatest potential is not necessarily the place we use it, but more importantly, is how we use it. Because you nailed it, right? If we have 50,000 locations, X amount of units, that is a significant amount of data that comes in on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, right? And then we look at the computing power needed to process that many data points to give us our KPIs. There are cloud costs associated with that, right? So then it becomes a matter of, hey, are we cutting costs from a process standpoint? But we're cutting costs from a process standpoint, but we're increasing costs from a cloud standpoint. I think I'm getting some background noise. So where's that going? So it's not only how or the place we use it, but how we use it. What type of heuristics can we use to complement the IoT placement so that we can get the most value out of what we're looking to do, whether it's, again, inventory management, whether it's asset tracking, or whether it's whatever other process from a supply chain standpoint. And so I think that's the one call that I would have is, for the audience is not just focus on the place and where we're putting these sensors and what processes we're looking to transform with these sensors, but it's how we're using the sensors and how we'll be managing that data and how we'll be processing all of those data points to then manage our businesses and processes.
Yeah. Okay. And Tony, turning to you, I mean, I guess you're related to that. I suppose it's almost kind of saying, what are big business problems that we always face, that businesses often face, where, IoT has suddenly got the potential to really improve that, that solution. We were talking about robotics earlier. The problem for warehouses is, how do you hire enough staff? How do you get them enjoying their jobs rather than plodding up and down a huge warehouse? robotics is suddenly a technology that wasn't available 20 years ago, which can really enable some different ways of working. So in terms of Internet of Things, are there some particular problems in our supply chains where you think IoT, that can suddenly make the difference, which just wasn't possible before?
Yeah, I think it makes the most sense. Again, how we use the data, like Andre said, but in areas where you're holding a ton of cost, right? You're holding a ton of cost, and whether that be from an inventory standpoint, if it's from a warehouse, something to better track your inventory, better utilize your inventory, but also from a liability standpoint, right? So something that's not totally in front of you, but that large companies hold liability cost because of dangers of certain jobs, right? So where we could use, just like the robotics we've talked about, use them in a more harmful environment where we're putting humans at danger, because where you're putting humans at danger, you're usually paying them a lot more because they're put into danger, and you're also holding a lot more liability or insurance or cost just in case something happens, right? So it's almost something that's not in front of you all the time saying, oh my gosh, I'm losing so much money, because it's something that's budgeted in every year, but you've got this massive cost that could be a special place for IoT. And then what you're doing is you're taking the human out of the dangerous spot and putting them into a more suitable spot for a human. And if you lose a robot, it's some cost, but it's also just cost at that point. It's not somebody's life and cost, right? So there is the ethics about that too. And I don't want to get all replacement here, but we deal with a lot of the automotive industry here in the U.S. is dealing with a lot of UAW and strikes right now, right? So there could be a time where, and I'm not for this, I'm just saying this could be something that happens where if labor is so fluctuating based on agreements and negotiations that can't be done, that certain jobs could be taken by a robot that's displaced in a certain replacement setting, right? A robot is not going to do what a human can do in everything, but it can do certain things. And there might be time for when these automakers or something cannot negotiate the right contracts, and they turn to a robot to kind of take over in that place.
That's some really interesting thoughts there, Tony. And actually, one of our audience, James Washington, has asked, can we share specific examples of how your organization, or maybe organizations you work with, has utilized IoT to automate processes and ultimately reduce operational costs. So if we've got some specific examples, let's see if we can bring them in. But I think that's a great example, Tony, of yours, of thinking, where in operations, whether it's warehouses, transport, kind of production, manufacturing facilities, where have we had accidents in the past? Whether they're accidents or injuries, whether they're near misses, those are the risk points. And is there a way that that we can use Internet of Things to better control that? So Andre, I don't know whether the safety liability thing is one that you're focused on in Nike, or is it kind of things like, I think you were saying, where are the big costs for the organization, and I guess stock and inventory and lost sales is a real key one when you're supplying thousands of your own stores and your retailer stores. So are there kind of areas where IoT is kind of on your agenda at the moment? I mean, obviously, if you don't want to disclose it, that's quite understood as well. I don't want to kind of have you reveal anything.
I can certainly speak from a historical standpoint, because Tony brought up some really great points, especially about the the human life component and where things may be dangerous for human, but relatively easy for robots, right? Robots can have a smaller form factor, can reach certain places that humans can't, et cetera. And so when you look at maybe operations in a distribution center where maybe design may not have been forward thinking in terms of maintenance or conclusive or all encompassing from a maintenance standpoint of ease of maintenance, it's how can we, maybe as an example, use IoT to place sensors on conveyor belts or certain mechanical components to trigger, hey, here's a warning. This this material or this particular component needs to be maintained or needs maintenance, right? And then based on whatever maintenance is needed, hey, is this a process for a robot that they can take care of, or do we need a human to come in and actually complete this maintenance? And so those are the types of conversations that you can have when you introduce IoT in those high risk and kind of more dangerous areas of a distribution center or warehouse, et cetera. As far as, I'm sorry, I lost sight of your second part of your question because Tony just made a really great point, and I wanted to build on that. But yeah, that's what I had in mind.
Okay, no, thank you. And Tony, are there, have you kind of come across specific examples where that kind of thing has been happening, where IoT has been used? I can think of one actually where I think a year or two back, and this question, do you call it IoT or what do you call it? But certainly I think there's sort of kit that you can put on, people can wear essentially, where there are sensors on what they're wearing, and it can just detect basically, is their stance bad? Are they bending when they're picking things up? Are they not bending their knees? And if you've got a few sensors on a suit or on a little jacket or waistcoaty kind of type thing that you put on, it can actually detect and therefore you can give very positive feedback to the worker to say, look, I think I think you just need a quick refresher training on how you pick up things and how you pick from shelving. So that's one example that I've seen a few years back. But I wonder if you've come across ones like that.
Well, I mean, think about your Apple Watch or something that's tracking your heartbeat, or it's tracking your, certain activity. You've taken so many steps, right? So, going into a plant setting, having some kind of watch that when you walk in the door, it detects that, oh, somebody checked in, somebody went to the line. Oh, somebody went here. Somebody's heart rate's up. Maybe tell them to take a breather. Like what you're doing is you're building on your company in terms of, okay, wait, there's a healthcare component to this, right? So most of it's financially driven, but there's a healthcare component to this that it builds into your healthcare system and how you can negotiate rates with your healthcare provider. You can incentivize based on that. You can check in on people. You can do certain things via this, wearable or whatever you say, and it can make your processes better, right? And then going back to kind of like the bodysuit or what you were talking about, I mean, that's how they make these robots, right? They detect how people do it, so they mimic it with robots on sensoring. Now, I haven't seen it to a great degree, but I know it, excuse me, I know it's coming. So I work currently in an industry that is up and coming in a big way from a renewable energy source. And I'm talking about hydrogen, but also hydrogen brings some safety issues that have to be very cognizant of hydrogen. So I see the future of IoT really happening in the hydrogen market, to where there's connected tank sensors, there's connected fleet sensors, there's connected, all of these sensors are not only connected from a company, but they're also shared amongst companies so they can better sell hydrogen as a fuel for the economy to get over that, I'm a consumer and I have a hesitation because, the Hindenburg blew up, 100 years ago or whatever it is, right? Like there's something that has to happen in terms of, okay, we have all this data and it's amongst all these different big companies, and now we can share it and we can get that public opinion and we can turn it around to where it's, it's a positive story and we're helping the environment and we're truly hitting our net zero goals in 2030 to 2050.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tony. That's again really interesting, thinking how in a specific industry that really could, help kind of acceptance and so on. We had a really interesting comment actually from Rebecca Morgan, who's commented on one of your points, Tony, which I think is around your example about people, the workers wearing sensors, and the worker suddenly saying, "Oh, you've got a high heart rate" or whatever. And I guess Rebecca's raising this point about, does this raise a risk of data security? And, kind of how do you kind of mitigate that? I mean, if someone suddenly, you're absolutely right that it's got great potential to deal with liabilities and potential liabilities of insurance on. But perhaps it's introducing a liability where someone says, "Christ, all my confidential data about how fast I breathe and my work patterns and so on. Now that's all been taken, and someone could kind of use that against me." Maybe sort of talking it up a little bit, but I guess it's a very relevant point Rebecca raises there.
Yeah, and that's always, going to be the question, right? With wearables, with any kind of technology that could better a system of data, is it also ethical? Is it also breach on someone's, identity? I do think there's a fine line. So, a lot of companies are already doing it in some way, right? So whether it be your laptop that IT can trace, or it's just a different form, and there would have to be guidelines and ethical statures, and maybe it's pick up your watch as you walk into the plant and not carry it home with you or whatever it is. But because it's a really good point, Rebecca, one that shouldn't be taken lightly. But I do think there's good applications for it to where you're not, let's just say, tracking somebody on a manual log, which happens today. Okay, so somebody checked in at the weld cell and then checked out, and somebody else came in. Instead, it's just monitored, and it's super seamless, and it saves a lot of money. And you can also incentivize those workers to make sure they're wearing it at the appropriate times. Somehow you can incentivize them, whether it be through bonuses, whether it be through, personal time off. If you incentivize in the right way and you use it in the right way and you're not using it in an incriminating way, I think there's benefit to it.
Yeah. And certainly it's very interesting that, the worker sensor kind of, the worker locator, because certainly there's a lot of accidents which sadly happen where someone is in a location, someone else thinks that location is clear of humans and a piece of machinery moves, or they get, basic things, they get stuck in a cold room, overnight or something awful like that. And, these things happen. And you think it really is very possible to avoid that these days. So some interesting examples there.
Well, think about it too, real quick, Alistair. I won't take too much time here, but if you have a system, an IoT system that's fully connected with your company, and you see wearing a wearable or having a camera, whatever it is, that you have 5 incidents per month at a certain location of your plant, what are you going to do about that? You're going to learn, you're going to fix that, you're going to avoid those in the future. But then you could even take that one step further and tell or sell data to OSHA, and they could write in some standard or some work ISO quality standard that could say, okay, if you're dealing with this type of environment in a plant, ensure to do these following steps. And I bet you avoid a lot of occurrences in the future, not only in that plant, but in other plants.
Yeah, great. No, thank you.
And I think one thing, Alistair, on that, if I could, just really great point. I think what happens is, we have to define, one, what is the product, what is the use case, right? How are we using it? What are we using it for, right? Secondly is, who would have visibility to this information, right? The data access, that would be critical. And then lastly would be the consent of the employee to say, hey, understanding this is a use case, this is who would have visibility. Yes, I do opt in, or no, I do opt, or I opt out. Kind of like on the, with the cookies, right? When you now log onto a website and for the first time, it's like, yep, I opt in, or no, I opt out of these certain cookies. It's similar to that type of model, but with their own personal information.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we need those sort of controls. Great. No, so our last point is around which IoT solutions are right for your business. And I guess to some extent we talked around that quite a lot. And given the hardware and data costs and challenges, are there good starting points for this journey? So I guess perhaps for you first, Andre. Actually, to me, I've been quite surprised in this episode. They genuinely are totally unscripted, so we never know how the discussion's going to go. And I have to say, I was kind of imagining we'd be talking more about how do we put IoT sensors on, every product, every pallet, every case going through the supply chain, and we're talking much more about kind of, putting it on kind of assets like machinery and so on, and equipment and vehicles, and putting it potentially on people as a way of making sure, not in the spooky way, but to kind of protect them and so on. So it's been really interesting the way the discussion's gone. But are there solutions where you're aware that the hardware and software is now sort of there as a turnkey solution? Buy this box of 100 sensors, stick them on wherever you want to, log on to this website, and hey presto, there's all your information. Have we got to that stage yet, as far as you're aware?
Yeah, we have actually. In a previous life, it was, hey, let's put, because of, and getting to the cost, because it's too cost prohibitive to put RFID tags on millions of assets, right? What can we do to, again, from a heuristic standpoint, as I mentioned earlier, put them on enough assets to where we gain confidence in our key metrics, where we can develop a model, whether it's AI or just kind of some sophisticated heuristic that would then tell us or give us confidence in what we're seeing, what we're tracking, what our movements of our assets are, right? So from tagging millions of assets, how can we tag with a less sophisticated tag, or just a kind of a general tag? How can we tag a lower number of assets with a more sophisticated tag where it gives us the GPS location, where it's always an active beacon and saying, hey, I'm here, versus a passive tag. So we can understand, the heuristics and get the visibility that we're looking for, but at a much lower cost, but at a way that is still value added from a data insights standpoint to the business. The insights standpoint to the business. The insights standpoint to the business.
We've got a little bit of an echo coming from you, Andre. So in terms of that, Andre, just as a quick follow-up on that, so are you saying that you've got things to a point where if you wanted to say, actually, the whole thing's there, we now want to kind of put the tags or whatever they might be, we're going to put them on 100 forklift trucks in 10 warehouses because we think that's the next really useful thing to do. Were you then in a position in that company to say, yeah, we just stick them on, everything else is there, there's nothing more to develop, it's all there?
Exactly. Yep. The tag was there. The software for the tracking, the UI was a off-the-shelf solution, pretty much. You just kind of put the beacon inside of the asset or on the asset, and from there log into the platform, and everything is right in front of you, right? And so you can again, and that was the visibility that you need when you're talking about asset management and inventory management.
Absolutely. Great. That's a really interesting example. And Tony, finally, with you, kind of, are you aware of sort of almost turnkey sort of hardware, software, all kind of ready to go as a way of being able to start using this technology without, often I think people fall into the trap, and we've talked about it before on episodes of trying to do too much too early. But if you can just say, hey, I'm going to start in this particular location, and this is what I'm going to kind of put sensors on, because I think that's going to be a lot of insight, just get them out of the box and get going. Are there examples of that you're aware of?
I mean, yeah. So from I'll talk about myself. So we have, and I'm sure they're everywhere in the world, but the Google kind of security cameras, right? So when you sign up for a package of home security, let's put it that way. So when you sign up for a package of home security, you can get cameras, you can get sensors for your doors, you can get doorbells, you can get all that stuff, and it's all connected via a dashboard on your phone, right? So take that to the plant level, they're doing the same things. And as Andre mentioned, with whether it be asset tagging to know exactly where your flow's going within the plant into a dashboard, cameras seeing, from a thermal perspective, where there's maybe gases that are leaking, from a safety perspective to set off an alarm that allows people to get out of the, plant, all connected to this almost, it's an IoT kind of suite that allows for better and efficient and safer management of plants. And then as Andre mentioned with the RFID tags, fleets are getting better, where you now can track your packages a lot better. It's always been a huge gap to have something shipped internationally via a boat or even an airplane and actually know where your freight is. So now there's companies out there and systems out there utilizing tags, utilizing sensoring, utilizing AI that can actually, if you go to a dashboard, you can see it in the middle of the Baltic Sea or whatever it is, right? So there's like there's this environment that's already out there that's just going to get better and better.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's a great note to finish on.
Tony.
Sorry.
I was just going to say that's a great point. That's a great point because that was the exact use case, international shipments for asset tracking. Yep.
Yeah, they're great. Good. So so great point to finish on. Thank you very much, Andre and Tony. I'm sorry, I'll give Nermeen a shout out because I'm sure she's frustratedly been trying to get into this episode. But Nermeen, I hope you'll enjoy it on the download. So a reminder that you can watch again on demand in a day or two's time. So thank you to our audience, and I think I'll pick as most valued contribution, not just because of her last comment, which says, I think today's show has been one of my favorites, great conversation, but not because of that, but because, Rebecca, you raised a really interesting point about security and cyber and privacy and whatever. So a Supply Chain Talk mug will be on its way to you. Our next episode is in 2 weeks' time, so we've got a gap next week. So 2 weeks' time on November the 8th at 4 p.m. UK time. And our subject then is spending green to make green, creating a sustainable supply chain. So a very familiar topic of sustainability there, but we always have more and more insights on that. So thank you again very much to Andre Kirkland, Lead Tech Program Manager at Nike, and to Tony Lancioni, Supply Chain and Product Lifecycle Lead at Noble Gas Systems. Thank you to our audience for their attention and contribution, and look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. Goodbye.
Thank you.